But let's say the following things. Because electronic voting appear to mean different things for different people. And we have to get to a point where we narrow the definition of electronic voting for the South African context. And some rough ideas, these are not commission determined decisions, but rough ideas. It is possible to have an electronic voting machine which operates at the voting station and is not online. And because it's not online, it reduces your risk of hacking an attack. That's one. Two, it is also possible to have a voter verifiable audit trail. Because human nature wants confirmation that the thing that the machine does, it's that which you have opted for. And now a voter verifiable audit trail means when you choose, you go there, the machine is activated, you press the option which you want to vote for. There's a printout of your choice. You confirm the choice. It asks you, is this your choice? You confirm, then there's a printout, and that printout can be validated with a stamp and placed into a ballot box. For validation purposes, you could then have a certain number of pre-selected or a randomly selected voting station who will count those voter verifiable audit trails and compare those against the results from the machine. And once that process is done, then you can upload your results in the normal way. But this thing will require huge public investment. Initially, there's going to be a huge public investment required to purchase all these things in sufficient quantity, because you can't have just one machine at the voting station. You need to have multiple streams to be able to allow for queues to move without creating frustration and so on. So those are some of the ideas. These are some of the things that are emerging from the research that we are doing, and so on. As to when will South Africa have the money to make this investment, frankly, I don't know. But the commission itself is keen to engage the subject matter in a serious way. Training for journalists, yes, we are available. We have always partnered with SANEF and other media houses to provide the training that may be necessary. Thanks, Chair.
I suggest you get refreshments. There are a few tough questions. I realize the job of Chief Electoral Officer is not so easy. But I want to let this question go to the chairperson. It comes from Adrian Basson. He wants to know, in fact, he makes a statement first by saying that the amendment of the Electoral Act is a major policy development for South Africa that could dramatically influence our political landscape. And then he asks, what was the IEC's input on this to Parliament? Essentially, Adrian is saying, what advice are we giving Parliament as the Electoral Commission in relation to the imminent amendment to the Electoral Act following the Constitutional Court ruling? And then he also asks, what is the work that is cut out for us as the Electoral Commission to educate the public about these changes. Chair, may I leave that with you for a moment?
Thank you, Commissioner, Program Director. Yeah, this is a very good question and an important one indeed. As the Commission, immediately after the judgment was made by the Concord, we were in principle very clear that we as a Commission, we now will abide. And we then communicated with Parliament and indicated as such. Among the things then we offered and we put on the table was that to the extent that issues that the Parliament has to deal with, we don't want to confuse the public that we are overreaching in terms of our role and responsibility. Parliament makes the laws. But in the process of making the laws, we as an institution, we have a repository of skills and competency that should then be made available or be put at the disposal of Parliament so that Parliament is enriched as well as supported by us as an institution in order for them to meet their obligation as their ruling made it clear. And in that process, we have now been seized with engagement with Parliament. And among the things that we actually have done, not only for Parliament, but also we're taking that to the public, is the issue of what are the options that are on the table around the political systems. So we've prepared and packaged a comprehensive list, and that information can be shared with yourselves. There's a comprehensive list of the options and scenarios that these are the systems that prevailed from a comparative critique and analysis. Now, the Commission is very careful that it does not recommend a particular system. It creates a platform of broadening the knowledge and the understanding of what entails issues of political systems, and in a technocratic sense, will also avail a technical team that, as the CEO also pointed out, that will then be available continuously to Parliament until the process is completed, to provide them all the necessary technical information about the system, the electoral systems, and its applicability into our environment. As a Commission, we do not have a system that we say it's our preferred system. We will abide with the elected representatives' pronouncements once the matter has been exhausted. And regarding broader political education, a part of the mandate of the Commission is that of civic education and democracy education and development. We plan to strengthen, within the limited resources from our fiscus, we plan to strengthen the programs that should at least give us a minimum critical mass of understanding of the issues that are before the electorate, which would include aspects of the amendment, but it goes beyond that. It will also be whatever systems would have been identified. It would be for the Commission to educate the citizenry and the voters as to the voting approach and what are the implications. I mean, earlier on the CEO was also illustrating, if, for example, a composite election is done, then it would then mean the Commission must go out and then teach the people that you now have 5 or more ballots in your voting station. And we are also exploring other innovative approaches, and some of them would also entail us entering into partnerships like we've never done before with yourselves as the members of the media. Among these things is for us to be in a position that we need to now shift the emphasis on the physical communication engagements, workshops, and all those things. The period of COVID has told us that we must embrace technology even more. So we are exploring with our communication teams to look into how then we could actually embrace technology for technology to enhance our communication and reach to the masses. And among the options that we are exploring now is the issue of a mobile communication capability, where we would be in a position that we can have live, just-in-time broadcasts throughout our civic education engagements, as well as various other communication engagement with the various stakeholders. So we are looking into this space, and we will be announcing details of new and innovative initiatives that would be part of our stakeholder engagement and communications. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to go back to the Chief Electoral Officer. Quite a few very key questions. The first one, it's whether the IEC is ready and well capacitated to monitor new regulations regarding the funding of political parties. The specific question is whether it will take on extra staff for this task, or it is, as we speak, well capacitated. That comes from Karian Duplessis. And I imagine, CEO, this would be your question. Mahlatsi wants to know if we have looked at electronic voting. I know you have spoken about that a little bit. Perhaps you just want to stress on that issue. Angie Kapelianis asks a very interesting question. She says, what's the worst case scenario for the IEC and the country regarding next year's local government elections with a COVID-19 global pandemic continuing? I hope not, Angie, but those that are on the panel will answer this in very specific terms. I leave this with you, CEO, for a moment.
Thanks, Chair. With respect to the last question, the worst case scenario is that we are back at level 5 in a month when an election must be held, in terms of the risk adjusted strategy. And in those circumstances, a free and fair election may prove to be impossible. And in that circumstance, or perhaps let me elucidate this by saying, it would then mean parties are not able to have unfettered access to voters, so candidates can't campaign. We may not be able to have people come out to voting stations, and so on. So on that evidence, the Commission may then have to be forced to consider approaching the Electoral Court for relief, which relief may include moving them out until circumstances are such that possibilities of free and fair election are re-enacted. So that's what it would mean if we were to go back to level 5 or even level 4. Now, with respect to the question on plans for protection of personal information, I think we did indicate in the presentation that we are introducing a requirement to redact certain information on the voter's roll in the version that goes to political parties, so as to minimize the unreasonable disclosure of personal information of people. This is a matter on which we have consulted with the National Party Liaison Committee as well as the information regulator. So in that sense, we were trying really to reduce the unnecessary disclosure of information. And of course, we've got to be mindful that this needs to be balanced against the decisions of the Constitutional Court on the address. The court has made it clear that the voters' roll must have an address for purposes of campaigning and checking whether the voters' roll is in fact correct. So the proposition at the moment is to redact certain information from the ID number so that it is not a 13-digit number, but at least parties are able still to verify. Then there's a question on the penalties arising from transgressions to the Electoral Code of Conduct. The Electoral Code of Conduct provides for a number of penalties. There could be a fine to a maximum of 200,000. A party could be deregistered. Votes for parties could be reduced in part or completely. Candidates may be disqualified, and so on and so on and so on. So as matters stand, the penalties are severe. As matters stand, the penalties are severe. A greater challenge that we have is matters being placed before the Electoral Court for adjudication. Because I think there's a mistaken belief that those sanctions are meted out by the IEC. It is not so. The sanctions are meted out by the Electoral Court. So in other words, if there's a transgression and that there are facts that establishes that transgression, that must on application be brought before the Electoral Court for consideration and adjudication. And once the court is satisfied that indeed a transgression has happened, then it can exercise its jurisdiction to decide what penalty to mete out. Then there's a question on the by-elections and Makana. I think we've provided the detail. Makana is not part of the list because there are still judicial processes that are currently underway. As soon as those are clarified, we will either include it or exclude it. Then party funding. We have started the recruitment processes. Currently, there's a CE for the unit and some administrative support for him. And as the act gets implemented, I think we'll grow it organically. We'll grow it organically. We have to work with other agencies. The success is not going to be so much on the extent of people or the number of people employed, but rather how well we work with other institutions, banks, the Financial Intelligence Center, SARS, and related institutions. And of course, discussions with those institutions have been held, and cooperation terms are being agreed. So that's really how the thing will work out.
Thank you, CEO and Chairperson. We have some more questions. Some of those you have dealt with, CEO, in relation to a question by Llewellyn Prince. They want to know what is the plan to hold, to catch up with all the outstanding by-elections. I think the CEO has indicated that we are looking at possibly, we are consulting and will possibly be making announcements once consultations have taken place on a possible date sometime in November or early December. But that really is the plan, and the plan would include holding all of them, as I understood you. There is a question, of course, that Isaac Minar was asking, what do we do in relation to disclosure of information? On that score, I think the CEO has answered. We just want to thank you, Isaac, for indicating as well in that question that tomorrow there is a launch of the report on proactive disclosure of information and elections in South Africa. We will make an effort to follow that. There was a question from Zukiswa about community media, and I'm sure CEO, you would want to reassure community media that they play a very key role in local government elections, and that they wanted to know whether there would be training for them as well in these elections. The question that we also see here, it's from Temba Sipotugele. He says, has the IEC taken into consideration that next year's local government elections might take place during rainy seasons, which might have an impact on voting day? I'm almost certain that Chairperson, you would want to speak to Temba on this one.
Thank you, Program Director. I think it's important to know that we as the Commission have to work with the given, and the given is the prescribed timetable or time frame in law as to when elections must take place, and then we have to plan accordingly. In a given year, there perhaps are very few windows where you are not affected by the weather. When we have elections in the period of April to July or so, the winter has an impact on the work of the Commission. And when you come into spring, the different weather conditions prevail, which is the rainy season. But interestingly, if it is in the winter, we also have a Mediterranean climate in the country. So geographically speaking, the whole western board from the Eastern Cape into the Eastern Cape into the Western Cape, you have rainy season in particular in Western Cape. We work within those circumstances. So I think it's not easy to avoid those factors. But over and above that, we also have issues of infrastructure availability. As a country, we are dependent and rely on the infrastructure that's schools and so on. And we have to also work around and see how we balance with schools, because certain periods may not be favorable to schools because it might be in the peak of their exams and so on and so forth. Yes, I think Temba, we have to roll with the punches, if I may put it in a what you call metaphoric sense. Thank you.
I think we are now pressed for time. In fact, we are a minute or two just over our time. I know that our partners in SANEF are committed and they do have time constraints. I want to give you a minute each to wrap your thoughts. Anything that you wanted to have raised and you didn't, you're now reflecting I'll start with you, Chairperson, and then I come to you, Chief Electoral Officer.
Thank you, Program Director. I think the most important part is that this is a forum that is part of the ongoing partnership between the Electoral Commission and the members of the Fourth Estate. Incidentally, I'm asking myself, who is actually a Fourth Estate? Is it the Chapter 9, 10 institutions or the media? But it's something that we can talk about over coffee one day. But it's an important relationship that we, as the Commission, we value. It is important that it is understood in that context by ourselves that we have a collective responsibility to make sure that the democracy that this country enjoys is never lost to us or compromised. And we rely on the partnership with yourselves as the heads of the media, as well as the journalists, to actually keep us on our toes, but at the same time enhance our work in terms of the understanding of the issues that we need to take into consideration in our plans. And lastly, for us to work together in partnership in making sure that we keep our citizenry and we keep our society vigilant about its democracy, conversant and competent about the democracy and the electoral democracy issues that are on the table. And one is, as one has said earlier on, is that I'm looking forward to see us coming up with innovative initiatives now that relate to communications, electronic and mobile communication activities, where we can actually have a continuous broadcast throughout the year on democracy issues between ourselves and yourselves as the custodian of our communication and media. Thank you, Program Director, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Chair. Sai?
Yeah, no, just in conclusion, it is clear that we have our work cut out. The onset of the COVID pandemic has complicated many aspects of the electoral program. So we need to do a little more than we have historically done to achieve at least the same level of efficiency within the electoral program. Now, speaking on behalf of my colleagues in the provinces here at head office, and as well as on the ground in the municipalities, we'll spare no effort to ensure that we give South Africa yet another a democratic event, electoral event that we can all be proud of. Thanks.
Thank you very much. You know, work like this takes a whole lot of people to put together. There are many people to thank indeed this morning. You may have seen the chairperson of the Electoral Commission and the Chief Electoral Officer, but there are many, many people. We want to thank SANEF for your partnership. It's always great. You know, we differ sometimes on issues. We hold different views. We never fight about these things. We always acknowledge that we have to report and inform. And this is it's a very exemplary thing. We will always rely on you. We'll always speak to you openly. We'll engage as we ought to. And we trust that you find that engagement reciprocal. Thank you indeed for coming to the party in the way that you have done this morning. We want to thank all editors that have taken your time from the busy schedules that you have to be here and to ask these questions. I know that there are a few more that you may have. We are here. We will not run away, and we will answer all the questions that you have. To all of the media houses you represent, thank you indeed. We know we can rely on you to inform the South African public and the world at large about the work we do as this nation. There are many people that have worked behind the scenes. When I got disconnected for a moment, you should have seen there were people around me who were connecting. Thank you very much. The technical team, you are amazing. People never get to see you, and yet you do this work. I'm grateful. On behalf of the Electoral Commission and SANEF, thank you for carrying that technical work until or thus far. There are many colleagues and staff members of the Electoral Commission without whom this work would not have been complete. Thank you indeed. Thank you. You are a great team. It's just a wonderful thing to watch you in action. For me, this is a very key thing we do. Whenever we get involved with stakeholders, we thank you for the opportunity. When we started this, in my heart, I was longing for just one thing. And it's captured very well by Helen Keller. And I want to quote her. She says, "I long to accomplish a great and noble task, but it is my chief duty to accomplish small tasks as if they were great and noble." I close that quote. It is exactly what it feels this morning. I want to salute all of you and thank you for staying the course with us this morning. We have come to the end and we see you next. Cheers for now. Thank you indeed.
Thank you.